views and opinions expressed on Xplorers Secrets of the Truth or that of their guests or contributors are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent. All information on Xplorers Secrets of the Truth is provided in good faith. However, we make no representation or warranty of any kind, express or implied, regarding the accuracy, adequacy, validity, reliability, availability, or completeness of any information on this talk show or website.
From monsters and ghosts to otherworldly beings, join the Explorers as they venture into the darkest realms, seeking the truth to what goes bump in the night.
I think. Are you there, Chad? I think we might be losing you. There we go.
Good evening and welcome to Explorers Seekers of the Truth, episode 84. Sit down, relax, shake off the normal world, and journey with us to the other realms of possibility. Tonight, I am joined by my best friend and co-host. Come with us as we explore and seek the truth about this world. How you doing this evening, Les?
Oh, fantastic. I want to apologize in advance to our wonderful listeners, though right now there are none. We had some major connection issues last show, which we seem to still be experiencing. We were going to test during the week. Everything was fine. And here we are again trying to go live. And I don't know if it's my internet or what, but it is just not working. It looks like we have a couple people tuning in now. So hopefully the technical issues are behind us for the rest of the night. But other than that, I'm fantastic. I'm happy to be back doing the show. We took a hiatus. We should have announced it, but we took a little bit of a hiatus because some of my kids had extracurricular activities, and between that and work and everything else, it's just there wasn't enough time in the evenings to keep up with the show. So we took the sports season off. But now that is over, we're trying to get back at it, and hopefully our internet issues don't keep us from it. But we are here. So how you doing, bud?
Doing pretty good. Just an FYI for anybody in this part of the country, Virginia and South, if you do go out in the woods, make sure you start checking yourself for ticks.
Uh-oh.
Had to pull one out of my back just 2 days ago.
Ugh.
It's March, and we already have ticks. So just a reminder. I mean, I'm sure everybody does it, but it's a good thing just to throw it out there. If you're out there, hiking or checking out some trail cams, good idea to give yourself a little once over afterwards.
Well,
or if you have a friend that'll do it for you.
I'd always check you for ticks, buddy. Like the old mighty silverbacks, we check each other for mites. One thing I will suggest for those who are going out in the woods, Sawyer, Swyer, I think is how you spell it. It's a black and yellow spray bottle. It's a tick repellent. I use that on all my outdoor gear and outfits, shoes, hats, shirts, pants, backpacks, you name it. And since I've started using that stuff, knock on wood, I don't have a tick on me. Previous to that, I was using that deep woods or backwoods or whatever it is, and I still got ticks on me. So This Sawyer stuff is awesome. So that's my shameless plug there.
Yeah, we got to get them as a sponsor for the show.
I know. And speaking of shameless plugs, I guess I should tell everybody where you could find us. I feel so rusty. It's been so long since we've been doing this. You could find us live on YouTube and on Facebook. You could comment under the show while we are doing it live, and we should, providing everything works, we should be able to see your comments and get back to you live during the show. You can find us on Twitter or X at Explorers Group, our website, explorersgroup.com. While you're there, follow us on Facebook, like and subscribe on YouTube. We're on all the major podcasting platforms. We in particular use Spotify. So while you're there, if you're on Apple podcasts or Google Play or whatever it is now, I don't know, they're all different. Give us a 5-star review. That's all that we ask. Is we fund all this stuff out of pocket, and we try and bring a good show to everybody. All we ask is give us a good review. That's it. Back at you, buddy.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Tonight we're going to discuss giants in America and some ideas about their possible links to other cryptids.
Mm-hmm.
And the story we're really going to cover, it comes from an old interview with Robert Riggs, the author of In the Big Thicket, Search for the Wild Man. So he
What?
Sorry, it clipped there for a second. So
your video is cutting in and out. So I again, I apologize to everybody watching. It's gonna be a long one. My internet sucks. For anybody out there shopping for internet providers, do not go with BreezeLine. It's the only thing available in the town that I live in, and it is absolute garbage. But we'll go back to it.
So, Bigfoots and Giants of East Texas was an interview with Robert Riggs that took place on Coast to Coast AM back in January 10th of 2002. So we're going 23 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is, I don't mean to cut you off there, buddy, but this is a topic that you have been bringing up a few times in some of our past shows. And it was, we talked about, this specific topic and this author that he talks about in that area, the Big Thicket, like Chad had mentioned. So let's get into Robert's background, if you don't mind, and tell everybody a little bit about him and why we find him so interesting.
Yeah. So Robert's background was he actually grew up in this area of Texas, the Big Thicket. He grew up in I think it was like Sour Lake area. And the interesting thing I find about him is he is a reporter he's worked for the Houston Chronicle, the Beaumont Enterprise, and he's published community papers there in his hometown area. And he, again, much like Linda Gottfried, started out as a reporter who heard these stories over the years, but wasn't an enthusiast going out looking and then creating stories and stuff like that, or he wasn't the cart before the horse. He was the horse who was out there and just happened to be the one that they asked to kind of cover these things. And he also consulted with the University of Tokyo and Harvard's College of Observatories. Now, for some reason, was a word I couldn't say today.
It happens to the best of us.
Now, one of the interesting things in this area is his consulting with Tokyo University isn't actually on wild men. It's actually on ghost lights, which this area is also noted for these plasma balls that are floating down roads, coming out of the woods, crossing roads. And he just comes from this area, and it's 20 some years of experience back in 2002 of hearing these stories, writing these stories, going back and researching previous, stories from the area, from his access to the archives for the newspaper.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned these ghost lights, and we talked about Marfa lights in the past. That's not the same ones, right?
No, this is a separate area of Texas. This is Martha is out towards the other end of Texas. This is the southern end of Texas going down towards like Houston, Galveston, Corpus Christi, coming up to the like Louisiana.
Okay. All right. Cool. So these ghost lights, they're the ones that you see in a lot of those ghost shows and stuff like that. I like people park at a certain part of a road, and it looks like this light kind of travels down, and people think it might be a train or a lantern or something, but then it starts going to an elevation that it couldn't be any of them.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I think this has been featured. Now, I don't know if Robert Riggs was featured during any of these, but I think Unsolved Mysteries covered it years ago.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
I've seen it
I
on a
think a
few. I
few
think
of
the paranormal, unexplained, or captured on camera, or something like that, was one of them.
I was just
Yeah.
about to say a couple of the paranormal shows have covered them and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And so there's a worldwide interest in this.
Yeah.
I mean, if Tokyo University is coming to Texas to look into this also, it's quite interesting in the fact that the guy is just a local reporter who they've asked to help, gather information, gather stories.
Right. That point right there, I think is one of the most compelling things for me is exactly what you said just a few minutes ago, is it's not a cryptozoological enthusiast
Mhm.
who's trying to report or, write these stories about said topic. This is a legitimate journalist who stumbled upon this topic and whatnot, and then just kind of, oh, hey, there's this thing that was laying in the newsroom or whatever, you want to call it, the office or whatever. He stumbled upon these files and kind of got a little bit intrigued, started looking a little bit more into it, and used his you know professional journalistic skill sets to dig deeper into, like I said, said topic. And I like the fact that it wasn't just some Joe Schmo who camps 5 feet off the road and, I'm a Bigfoot researcher and, I'm gonna write these stories about it, because I mean, anybody could do that, but this guy has the professional background to do it, give it true justice or
Mhm.
credibility.
Yeah, it's somebody who's looking at it from the outside, who is not out here claiming Bigfoot's this or Bigfoot's that or Bigfoot comes from here. When he starts, this is, his jump off point is, hey, Mr. Smith down in, Sour Lake reported seeing a man run through his yard last night that was like 7 foot tall and didn't look like he had clothes on. And,
Right.
a couple of his chickens got snatched. And, it's not somebody who's looking at it like, oh, 7 foot tall naked thing. Oh, it's got to be Bigfoot.
Right, right,
This is something that develops into a interest of, well, what is this thing that people are reporting, and where does it deviate from it's just a tall man running in the woods who just happens not to be wearing clothes.
right, right.
But I think we should talk about this area, especially this big thicket country of Texas. And like I said, he's from the town of Sour Lake, Texas, which
Mhm,
is at the very like southernish southwestern side of this area.
mhm.
So when we talk about this, you got to think about this is forest land the size of the woodlands of New England.
That's no small little, cluster of trees.
No, I mean this is a massive, land covered with some nice woods. If you think about it, it's the western extent of the eastern mixed forest.
Mhm.
So that's, basically what we have from, PA all the way down goes to this area in Texas where you got the pines, you got different kind of hardwoods and all that. I wish I knew exactly what kind of trees were in the woods, but you know, everybody says, "Well, what kind of tree is that?" I'm like, I don't know.
Right, right.
Tall,
Yeah, yeah.
round.
Yeah, I've honed my tree skills slightly. I wouldn't call myself a professional at all, because we like going out looking for mushrooms, and they
Hmm.
always say the best way to find mushrooms is to identify trees first. And once you identify the tree, then typically around the base or wherever, if it grows on wood or grows from the ground, you typically then find the mushrooms nearby. So,
Hmm. Now, also, when you think about this area, it's not just woods and forest. It's
Mhm.
also very similar to the Louisiana and Mississippi areas of the country where you have large swamps, bayous, rivers running through it. So you
Yeah.
have some marshland and stuff like that.
Right.
And, it's basically the southern end of pine forest for East Texas. So everybody, when people think about Texas, they always think, oh, Texas, it's desert, it's
Yeah.
dry, it's,
Yeah.
the wild, wild west.
Mhm.
To be honest with you, I've been in Texas a couple of times. I've yet to see the desert in Texas.
Right. Well, I mean, it is a massive state. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure you have a whole slew of terrain and different kind of climates and whatnot in there. But you're
Mhm.
right. What for me personally, every time anybody mentions anything about Texas, all I think is just a dry, flat, barren, reptiles and insects and desert. That's it.
Mhm. Yeah, the eastern part of Texas where, I've come through it several times is beautiful. It's
Mhm.
woods, it's small, like, little towns surrounded by forest. There would be one moth in my room, and it keeps flying at the light.
Right.
So, you got this area, and this is the eastern extent. So when you're looking at this is going up against, the borders of, like, Louisiana
Mhm.
and, like, parts of Arkansas. So, this is kinda woody, this is lush greenery, some big expanses of, pine forest and stuff in this area.
Mhm.
So, now,
Now,
like, looking
just
at
not you mentioned like Arkansas and stuff. Is this like the Texarkana area?
no,
No.
no,
Okay.
Texarkana is about Fouke is about 4 hours from this area.
Oh, okay. All right. So I was just in my brain. I was right away going to all right swamps,
Yeah.
Texarkana, Falk monsters. So no, it's not close.
Not close, but very similar in the terrain and environment.
Okay. All right.
You're looking at that whole section of the country, um, as it's kind of you got those mixes of like these swampy marshlands, then mixed with large extents of forest or mountain, not mountain necessarily, but hills and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So you're thinking along this right lines of the actual environment.
Hmm.
And yes, the hill country,
Yeah. Cindy.
Austin, San Marcos. Yeah, I've been to all those.
Yeah.
Uh, it is, yeah, that area, like, that's just kinda out where some of my family lives and stuff like that. It's green, like I said, it's rolling hills out that way. When you get further east, it gets a little denser with the woods, and you kinda notice it get as you're going. If you're coming into the state of Texas, you
Mhm.
notice it get like, oh, we're coming through woods, coming through woods, coming through woods. Okay, the woods are getting a little less dense, little less dense. Okay, there's a tree every like 400 yards, and then you're in green, pasture land, and stuff like that. Now, in this area that we're talking about is like the Lower Trinity River, which is east of Texas, and it runs all the way up to the Louisiana border.
Mhm.
So, yeah,
Matt's
Matt's over.
teasing me about the mushrooms.
Yeah, Matt's actually over in my living room right now.
Oh, nice,
Yeah,
nice. Commentation from
everybody's
the other
over.
room.
Yeah. So, and when you think about it, this area is about 60 to 70 miles wide and about 60 to 70 miles north to south
Hmm.
in that, area. So you're looking at a very dense chunk of very underdeveloped. You're not it's not like in certain areas where, oh yeah, we got a tract of land here. It's, a couple of miles and
Yeah.
then it's another town. It's, growing up where we grew up, you'd have a 2, 3 miles, maybe 5 miles squared of forest, but on the other side of that forest is the next little town over.
Right, right.
And as roads were cut and stuff like that, you have roads that cut through the middle of these areas. Here, you're not as developed. You have
Yeah.
some towns, and then it's kind of drive out into the woods for quite a while, and then you might hit something. But also in some of these areas, you don't have a lot of paved roads. That's one thing I've learned about Texas is they are roads, but they are not paved.
Right.
They are dirt roads, like stone roads.
Hmm.
They're maintained by the state, county, townships and stuff like that, but they're legitimately just dirt roads.
Nice.
Probably hear my wife over there yelling, talking about Texas. She's from Texas, so I'll probably get hit later. Yeah.
Well, and you said 60 to 70 miles. I mean, and speaking of roads, I mean, that's like an hour and a half drive just to drive through that tract of land. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If you were driving straight through it or straight across it, you're
right.
And then also, like, when they say 60 to 70 miles wide, that's just the big thicket, the area that they consider the big thicket. You might drive 60, 70 miles across it, and then you're not really hitting anything but maybe some small town of 500 people that's kind of still wooded, and you got the farms and stuff like that. And then it's nothing again then for several miles, and then might hit a little small city or bigger town.
Right.
So we're just looking at, when we say 60 to 70 wide and north to south equal distance, that's just what they consider the big thicket, which there is like a state park there and stuff like that. And I know my wife said she was there one time as a kid for Bible camp or something like that, but she had no good stories, so I stopped paying attention. Yeah, I'm gonna get hit later.
Stop paying attention. Oh boy. Yeah, you're gonna get
yeah, I'm getting beaten later. It's okay. I'm used to it. I'm surprised the door hasn't flown open behind me yet. But now this also encompasses two big river swamp systems in Texas, East Texas, the two of the largest in East Texas. So you're looking at, some definite areas where I would say, much like in Falk area and stuff like that, there's probably a lot of areas that man does not touch all of them, maybe once in a great while.
Right.
You got just tracks of swamp where, they go out there occasionally to, fish or something like that, but it's not every day there's somebody in this area that's going to see something or hear something.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to hit my cough button.
That's all right.
Now, getting into his introduction to this, right? Like I said, he started out, as a reporter who was just kind of covering some of these stories. But he goes back to when he was 10 years old, and he remembers hearing these stories that were in the newspaper and stuff like that, or the local gossip in town was of these, what they were calling back then, and even was getting into the newspapers as naked, wild, hairy men. So if you think about this, these reports are coming from 1952 in the Hardin newspaper, which is a local newspaper. These naked hairy men stories are showing up, not daily, but on a semi-regular basis, where they're getting reports, oh, it was seen again. You know how it is with a thing like that. Something exciting in a small town.
Right.
Oh, this, you go on Facebook now and all these small town groups. Oh, I saw this, white deer again. And I saw, a piebald deer. I've seen this, I've seen that. So back in 1952, you have in the Hardin newspaper, you have several reports of these naked, wild, hairy men popping up.
Yeah.
Now, when you think about this, that's approximately 6 years before the Bigfoot stories from California.
So you don't have that connection or, you know, something that people are going to want to copycat.
Yeah. Well, not only that, you got to think about it. We always look for Bigfoot stories, Sasquatch stories. if you're going to go back and research newspaper, you probably would want to start really looking at certain words like naked wild man, naked
Yeah.
hairy wild man.
Feral humans.
Yeah. So, but again, this is 6 years before Bigfoot, so the name isn't coined yet. You know,
Hmm.
but again, this also shows these stories have been around for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, these are like I said, predating California. So, you know, he kind of got into this thing where the Deep South actually has a long history of large, hairy, humanoid-ish creatures. And if you think about it, we were talking about Fouke,
Hmm.
the Boggy Creek. You know, East Texas has reports going back, you know, even prior to 1952. This was his local newspaper that he was working for that he had access to.
Right. Right.
You got the Fouke Monster, Mississippi, Louisiana, even into Florida. You have a pretty deep westernized Sasquatch history or naked hairy person history.
Yeah.
I don't want to say man because that might be offensive to some.
Yeah. Right.
So looking at this as kind of going into like he kind of starts looking at it using the modern term Bigfoot.
Hmm.
Okay. So when he's looking at this, he's finding these two different descriptions or two different categories of sightings.
Hmm.
What the people are actually seeing, not just types of like sightings. These are in some descriptions, the people are seeing what they basically verbalize as feral humans.
Hmm.
And then in other descriptions, what they're getting is the typical 7 foot tall, no neck, conical, you know, head, big, hairy, you know, brownish Bigfoot.
Right. Right. Which you
So,
you do hear about that a lot in a lot of the reports. We were talking earlier in the week when we were discussing the show. My gosh, excuse me. How a lot of people and it almost kind of like harkens to the Harry and the Hendersons when George was
mm,
staring him down through the barrel or the scope of the gun, and they see that the human in the eyes and not the animal in the eyes. You know what I mean?
mhm,
They're like, "Oh, I saw this creature, but the face was so human. I couldn't tell if it was a feral human
mm.
or you know, an animal."
Well, this is where this actually kind of gets even more interesting.
Okay.
So, there is a group of Native Americans
Hmm.
that no longer exist,
Mm,
or at least as far as anthropologists know, no longer exist.
okay.
That even amongst the Native Americans were considered to be the most primitive people. But
Hmm.
a lot of times they barely refer to them as people, even. They just
Oh,
refer to them as a primitive group.
okay.
And their name was, and I'm going to probably butcher this, the Krunkalis tribe.
Hmm.
Now, the interesting thing is this tribe of Indians, Native Americans, excuse me,
Hmm.
they lived in the Texas Gulf Coast area. Now, they lived closer, or at least most of the information that we have had them living closer to Corpus Christi and Galveston Island,
Uh-huh.
or as they would have called it, Rattlesnake Island.
Mm.
The only place in Texas I've ever seen a rattlesnake.
Really?
Yes, Galveston, a
Huh.
beach community. On the freaking sidewalk, there's a rattlesnake.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, yeah, because I've walked in hill country in shorts and flip flops and never saw one. Go to the beach where I'm supposed to be in shorts and flip flops, and there is one on the corner of the street,
Oh,
sitting,
Jesus.
sunning itself. I digress. Um, So when they look at this tribe, even anthropologists consider them to be the most primitive natives that ever lived in the United States.
Mhm.
Now, think about that statement, that ever lived in the United States. We are talking Clovis,
Mhm.
pre-Clovis. They're saying these people were even more primitive, yet were 14,000 years later.
Yeah. Yeah.
In some of these early settlements in North America. I mean, we could debate that all day long. Somebody wants to do that with me. I'm more than happy to prove them wrong. Notice it does say professor at the bottom there.
That's very true. That's very true.
But so anthropologists consider this group super primitive. And to the point where some anthropologists even believe that that it's a primitive form of man, not Homo sapiens sapien, though. That almost in the missing link territory
Okay.
of evolution, where they don't find enough of them to start doing any kind of like DNA sequencing or anything like that. They're finding anecdotal evidence, but they're
Mhm.
not finding physical evidence.
Kind of like
Oops, sorry, you just
cut out.
really crackly if it didn't.
Hello, can you hear me? Is that better?
There you go. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, we're talking before about like that relic hominid
Heidelbergensis.
yeah,
Heidelberg.
Heidelbergiensis or something like that. Yeah, where
Yeah,
it's
somewhere
not
around there.
it's bigger than modern day human. That's it. That's it. You got it. Bigger than modern day, taller than modern day man, but not small like the Australopithecus. Not quite as big as what they assume Gigantopithecus is, because we still only have molar remnants and jaw fragments. We don't have a full
Mm,
skeleton, so they're just hypothesizing on the size based on that, which I love because you're talking about people uh, challenging you with your humans migrating into the North America. So many people sit there and say, "Oh, Australopithecus is this big and it's that," and we know we no we don't have anything to prove that it is that size, because all we
mm,
have are molars and jaw fragments.
yeah. And we actually have evidence to disprove this whole coming across the land bridge in the Bering Strait and
Hmm.
coming to North America. There's clearly enough scientific evidence that scientists have stopped saying this is how it happened.
I think that was Charlesworth theory 4 or 5. We have so many now.
Yeah, I know. I kind of stopped counting. I mean,
I'm gonna
somebody
make a
should
book.
write them down. I
I
mean,
was gonna say, yeah, I was just gonna say I'm gonna go back through and write a book,
yeah,
the Charlesworth theories.
yeah. I'm sure you contact other members of my family. They have a few too. It'd be a family heirloom type collection.
That would
Now,
be interesting.
getting to the anecdotal evidence of these people, right?
Mhm.
The other tribes in this area, right, report that the average height of these male warriors is over 7 foot tall.
Mm.
They are said to have grown their hair long, black, being black haired, long, and they would grow it traditionally down past their waist.
Uh,
They'd also wear animal skins as covering. And since they were living in these swampy, marshy areas and, using the marshes, creeks, lakes, bayous to
mhm.
travel, hunt, fish, they were known to cover their body in mud and shark oil to keep the bugs away. They would use gator oil, shark oil, and stuff like that to keep bugs away. Well, if you've ever smelled any of that stuff, it smells
Oh, yeah.
freaking terrible.
And what do they always associate with Bigfoot?
A foul odor.
Right.
So, and also you got to think about it. If you just imagine being in the woods, right? It's shadows, it's dimly lit. You see down the trail a 7 foot tall, long, black haired creature covered in skins that smells horrible.
Mhm.
Well, at a distance, you can't tell it's covered by skin. So what are you thinking?
Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
And I would
know,
imagine like these people, like it's not like uh Native Americans where they would tan the hides, they would remove the hair and they'd sew it and
mhm,
create a clothing. This is more crudely just strewn over their shoulders or whatever, and I
mhm.
mean, it's just like furs thrown on.
I would assume every depiction of the atypical cavemen that we see in,
Mhm.
movies, when I think about, like, when they say they used, animal hides and all to cover, or animal skins to cover, I would just assume they cut a hole for their head,
Right, and just
draped it over their body,
yep. I mean,
and
I would imagine they probably don't even, like, tan it all that well, just kind of cut it, let it dry, and like you said, cut a hole in, throw it over, and they're covered.
yeah. I mean, at best, maybe they tie it off with some, vine or something like that, that it, so it's a little more form fitting.
Mhm.
But to me, I'm thinking they are, the what I think of a caveman, Neanderthal
Yeah.
type creature, like where it wasn't stitched, stitched together. It was just like, hey, it's got two arms. I got two arms. It's got a head. I'll wear the head on top of my head and stick my arm. They took out the meat and just
Mhm.
stuck themselves into it, tied it off, and
There you go.
covered it in the mud and the shark oil and stuff like that, just to keep the bugs away.
Mhm.
And I mean, you can't even think about, like, the shark oil was not like that advanced of a technique or mud. They realized, like, oh, these bugs, there was no science behind it. They were just like, oh, if I had mud on my arm, the bug landed here and not here, so I'm going to just cover my whole arm in mud now.
Yeah.
And oh, the oils. Well, I notice an alligator doesn't get a lot of bugs on it. Well, why is that? Just, we just killed an alligator, so I'm going to just rub, it on me so I smell like an alligator. Maybe I'll catch more alligators.
Mm. It is curious how that all gets figured out
Hmm.
throughout,
Well, I always
years.
go back to, like, the first person to ever eat a crab.
Yeah.
Like, how would you look at this basically water spider and go,
Right.
wow, you know what? There's probably something inside of it that tastes good. Like, you would have
Yeah.
had to have seen, like, a bird eat it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then, like, maybe scavenged, like a bird killed a crab and then you scavenged it from, but you saw a couple birds picking at it. So you're like, oh, well, evidently when they crack this open, there's something inside of it. And, they were picking at what's inside of it. Well, let me try it.
Yeah.
Is it a necessity of survival or is it just random observation that brings people to, hey, this is actually really tasty, or
This killed
this is
me or this
poisonous?
killed
Yeah.
George. Yeah, no, I'm not eating it.
Well, if you even look at, like, religions, and none in particular, but like ones that don't eat certain animals,
Mhm.
I would almost assume the reason they don't eat those animals originally comes from somebody didn't cook it properly.
Yeah.
Somebody got sick and died or got very ill. They went back and said, well, that's God's way of saying we don't eat those.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they make a, whatever. Oh, this animal roots in its own poop and stuff like that. So therefore, we don't eat it because it's not clean.
Right, right.
It becomes like a, hey, you know, we come from a scavenging, like, hunter gatherer backgrounding and stuff like that. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, we can eat this other meat raw, but when we ate this meat raw, Bob died. So let's not eat that meat,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, but that's, just that could be completely wrong. I'm just saying, I think some things we don't eat or that we only eat for certain things or certain ways comes from the fact of, somebody probably died eating it undercooked.
Right, right.
And it became a factor of like, oh, we just don't eat that or we don't eat this. Because let's face it, bacon is really tasty. You know, if a group of people found bacon first and they cooked it right and they were just like, wow, bacon is good,
Yeah.
they'd probably eat pork.
That's true. That's very
You know, but so yeah, poor Bob.
true.
I don't know why. Bob was just random. I couldn't think of a name that would go in that story, so just went with Bob. Don't don't know why. George is my next victim.
There you go.
So a lot of these sightings that describe the Native American sounding, I guess I want to say creature at this point,
Mhm.
are coming from the mouth of the Trinity River and the swamps. And these are several different independent people, different walks of life,
Mhm.
mostly not out there looking for Bigfoot. These are stories coming from just people who are out using the river for fishing, out using the swamps for, hunting and fishing and stuff like that.
Right.
I mean, so it's not necessarily, these reports aren't always, hey, I parked 5 feet into this parking spot off this gravel road and I'm out Bigfooting. You
Right.
know, it's coming from people who are just in the area, hiking, fishing, swimming, and they're seeing this, what they describe as like a Native American.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even to the point with this Native American and thought process, right? John Green had speculated at one of his books that this group of Native Americans had actually migrated from the Texas area to the Pacific Northwest.
Mhm.
And what people are seeing or thinking they're seeing as Bigfoot are actually the survivors of that tribe.
Right.
That they've just basically kept themselves out of the general population. Now, also, if you think of it, if they're not Homo sapien sapien, they're going to not see us as equals.
Mhm.
Like, if I'm not very well versed in monkeys, but monkeys who aren't domesticated ish are not going to run up and grab your hand and walk with you.
Right. Right.
Especially in the jungle or, wherever you would be,
Mhm.
that there was non-domesticated monkeys, they would stay away from you. They would avoid contact.
Mhm.
It would have to be that whole like,
Well, looks like we have lost Chad. If you can hear me, try logging back in. Because you are the one leading tonight's story, unfortunately. Let's see if we could get him in here. Forgive me, everybody. This is technical issues as always. Let's see if I could get him in. And looks like my camera is switching. Nothing is working here. Hold on. We got him. I hope. There you go. I don't know. And even like my GoPro switched from the primary camera to the in built-in camera.
here's the best thing. My camera disappeared. I was still watching you and hearing you on the feed.
Hmm.
But my camera went away and I had no options to bring my camera back up.
Interesting.
So,
Interesting. Interesting.
yeah, typical Be Live. So, if you think about it, like, to me, I could believe now. I just lost less. I hope something's working. Are you there,
Can you hear
buddy?
me?
I can hear you. I just can't see you now.
Just keep talking.
Okay. Well, I'll just keep talking because this is interesting. Uh, if you think about it, like, if there's this group of, you know, not quite humans that are ancestrally similar to us, but not us. they could decide to avoid the contact because these tribes actually did have contact with the co-Cronculus tribes, like the Apache and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And these tribes had said these people were like these things were super violent.
Hmm. Can you still hear me?
And yeah, I can still hear you.
All right. Okay. Good.
So, being super violent and stuff like that, kind of in that sense of like they didn't fit even into cultural society for that time frame.
Hmm.
And I mean, here's the thing, why are we so hard to believe that there aren't feral people?
Right.
That
Right.
there aren't just people out there that have decided they don't want to live in our society. They don't want to conform to, you know, societal norms, and they just want to live a primitive existence.
Hmm.
You know, a small a smaller subsection of that you almost got to think about, it's like people that live off the grid.
Yeah.
They don't want to live in a town. They don't want to have power provided by a power company. They don't want, their food provided by grocery stores. They want to live a more primitive existence on their own, sufficient to what they're doing.
Hmm.
So, they're not feral. They're not going to like attack other people most times, but they are people who don't fit or don't want to fit into society.
Right.
And you hear like on the Appalachian Trail and stuff like that, you hear a lot of stories of quote unquote feral people in Appalachia,
Hmm.
like people who have just given up on old society and have moved back into the woods and live a, you know, hermit life, or, like that's always the term used for certain people, is like, oh, they're hermits. They just don't conform to society.
Right.
Now, Riggs believed that these people, or primitive humanoids, had the ability of detection that borderlined on paranormal.
Hmm.
And I think when we say like paranormal, we right away jump to ghost aliens, a modern perversion of the term, and
Hmm.
not necessarily the actual like book definition term.
Hmm.
So his like research has indicated that there is an overlap with voodoo practices of like the Creoles in Louisiana and stuff and Mississippi, and even to the Choctaw Indian and their shamanic practices.
Hmm.
And these practices, are known to these tribes dating back to the beginning of their recorded history. And this is where you start to get into, you know, paranormal. Again, like I said, don't jump to the ghost UFO thing here. Think about like even in Europe, you have, this shamanic practices and stuff like that where they, knew how to combine certain things to cause certain effects in the brain. Not necessarily
Hmm.
they knew what the effects were, but they just knew, hey, if I take this, I relax. Or I
Right.
take this and my body speeds up, and I know, by being sped up, I can do more things or I can cover more distance. But then you also look at with this, if you, could these people have developed a different sense through their time? And if you think about like the two sides of the brain, you know, in our culture, in our society, we have developed that more rational side of the brain. Could others, could the other side be different and more rooted in what they would say is, quote unquote paranormal? Are you still here? I take it Les isn't here. So this group, maybe they developed their intuitive side of their brain, and they could have a completely different set of abilities that to us, to our society or our brain type would seem paranormal. And if you think about this, you're dealing with Les is coming back. Ah, there he is, buddy.
Hey, here we go.
I didn't know where you went. I was there talking. I was hoping I was still on air.
Can everybody out there still hear us? I don't know if we're getting cut off or not. I did
Matt,
pay the light bill, Matt. I
yeah, I
just
was gonna say Matt just commented and it popped up on my feed. So I'm thinking, and it looks like our Facebook was still open and running when you weren't there. So yeah. Like I was saying with this group, and we were talking about the paranormal stuff and like that. If they developed the other side of their brain, the non-rational side, the more earth-based side of it, the environment, the connection with nature, this could lead to what we would say is for our understanding, paranormal ability. Okay. And my thought on this would always be going back to, I think Les just disappeared again, that if you are not in our society, if you are still in the primitive human existence, your senses would be, higher and more attuned to your surroundings. And that could lead to A, better hunting, and B, avoiding being detected. Because if you think about it, if you're, not just a quote unquote modern woodsman, but if you were, a more primitive woodsman, you would know how to read the signs around you. You would read the trees. You would read the sounds of other animals. You would be able to take into consideration, like, why did this deer come running all of a sudden when it could have just easily have walked? They usually walk through this area. Well, if they're running, there's something up. And you also got to think about, like, I was just about to say that, Cindy, a better sense of hearing for sound. And also you think about the sense of smell. Right on. If you're not, and I'm not saying like that there's any specific things in our foods, but if you think about it, there's a lot of stuff that we eat nowadays that isn't natural. And if we're eating stuff that isn't natural,
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sorry, buddy. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I keep cutting in and out. I just wasn't sure if I was still even here or not.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So the things we're not eating that aren't natural have these chemicals and preservatives and all this stuff. Therefore, they are clogging receptors in our systems. We also have a lot of not toxins and necessarily but we have things other than fresh air in our general day-to-day existence. We got air fresheners, we've got carpet scent, we've got the smell of the glues that's used in our homes, the chemicals used to process the paper, if you have wallpaper, you have all these other things that are deadening our senses. If you're in a more natural state, you would be out there, you would have fresh air, you would know, hey, I smell something that smells a little off. Maybe it's I smell something rotten. Well, then like, hey, there's probably a carcass somewhere in this area. If I walk if the wind's blowing this way and I smell it more when the wind blows, I know to head that direction to find this carcass.
Right.
Also, if you think about it, if you're trying to avoid detection by humans, right? I smell you coming. If you think about it, like, even when we hunt, we wash our stuff, we bag it with, some pine trees, especially in the area where I used to hunt. It was mostly a pine forest. So we would bag it with pine and some leaves and some berries and stuff from that area to kind of get the smell into the clothing.
Hmm.
But then we get in a car. We sit in the car that has the Febreze air freshener in it. And then we get out in our
True.
hunting stuff. And we've went to a restaurant. We stopped at a gas station. We have a rifle that smells like oil. That we have, powder that's going to have a scent. You're going to have metals that aren't natural to the woods that are going to give off some odor.
Right. Right.
So if you're attuned to your senses or attuned to your environment, you're going to notice these things. And therefore, you might be able to avoid detection most of the time, because we're not saying they're perfect.
Hmm.
But you think about, we always talk about like, oh, it'd be so hard to camouflage. We have snipers. One of the field crafts they they go through is camouflage and concealment.
Right.
Carlos Halfcox crawled on his stomach for miles in between patrols of NVA soldiers, shot a general, and then crawled back out of this area. If you ever want to go look up the story, it is amazing. He was not detected because he was camouflaged. He had bushes, he had shrubbery, he had mud. He ran into a snake face to face, a very venomous two-step in Vietnam, right face to face, and just laid there until it passed. So this whole thought process of, these things, camouflage would have to be paranormal or it's cloaking.
Yeah.
Why? Why would, and I'm not saying they couldn't. I'm not saying that if they are a paranormal interdimensional creature, that may be a feature of the dimension they live in, is they
Right.
can do these things. What I'm saying is there's a rational ability if you take the rational brain approach and just say, well, we can do these things.
Yeah.
Why does it have to be paranormal? Why does it have to be a special feature that they download? Why
Yeah.
can't it just be a skill that's been passed off for thousands of years?
That's very true. And I've get that out of the way. I've mentioned it many times on many different shows. As far as Bigfoot goes, last scene of Harry and the Hendersons when
Mhm.
Harry's going back into the forest and he walks away and everybody's watching him, and then all of a sudden we're looking at the screen, we're watching this, frame by frame, and we're watching Harry because we're looking at what's moving, we're focusing on one thing, and then all of a sudden, here comes one, another one steps out from behind a tree, another one steps out from behind another tree, and the little baby one pops up and then walks. They were right in front of our faces,
Mhm.
and to your point, like with the sniper, if they know how to naturally blend into their environment. Look at a fawn, a
Mhm.
baby deer with the spots and everything. Even when they get up and they move, when they start moving through, even though they're like a rusty red with white spots, and they start moving through like a green, shrubbery and whatnot, or vegetation, once they start moving through and the sun's coming through and they're that dappling kind of starts, you can't see them. Or when they're laid curled up on the ground in a bunch of leaves, you can't see them until you're literally right on top of them. Like
Mhm.
things blend.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not to your point, it's not anything paranormal or out of otherworldly or anything like that. I mean, not that there aren't things that could I mean, take an octopus. Some species of octopuses can like change their coloration and
Mhm.
almost like
W
morph to whatever rock they're laying on, or
Yeah.
chameleons and
I
stuff
was gonna
like
say
that. You know,
chameleons and, other, and there's other animals that do it based on their environment.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, white-tailed deer, depending on what the environment that they come up in, will generally have different colors. You'll
yeah,
have
yeah.
your browns and red almost,
Mhm.
all the way to gray,
Yeah, yeah,
because the environment dictates gray is a more advantageous, survival mechanism,
right.
so their bodies are gray.
Mhm.
Other ones are browner or, redder because the environment dictates that. You'll
Yeah.
see it in certain
I mean, look at
lizards.
some species of moths. Like when they're on the trees and stuff, you don't know.
Mm,
You don't know it's a moth until it
oh, yeah.
flies away. They'll lay there with the
Yeah,
wings wide open and they look like bark. Owls
yeah.
and
Well, it's
everything.
like
You know
that.
what I mean? You can't see them, they're right in front of you.
Well, it's like that picture of the cat I sent you the other day. I
Yes,
told you
yes.
something was in the picture, so you kind of figured out that there was something there. But that cat has
Mhm.
the perfect camouflage for around here. It blends
Oh,
in
dude,
with the
it
town.
it took me a while. Like, if you would've just sent me that picture, I'd have been like, "Alright, you sent me a picture of your tree? Like, what is this?" But the
Yeah,
fact that you said, "Can you see something in here?" I was purposefully looking, and it took me a while.
yeah. How about you do our little disclaimer where they can find us, and I'm going to
Oh,
use the restroom
yes.
while you do that.
Sure, sure. Yes, we'll take a little bit of an intermission here, and, as Chad had requested, you could find us on Facebook and YouTube live every other Tuesday nights, as long as we could actually do it. Comment underneath the show, as a lot of people have been doing tonight. We've been getting comments from YouTube and Facebook. We will respond live, as we always try and do, as messages come through. While you're there, follow us on Facebook, like and subscribe on YouTube. You can find us on Twitter or X at Explorers Group, at our website, explorersgroup.com. Um, all the major podcasting platforms out there we are part of. We go directly through Spotify, which is one of my favorites. We're not sponsored by them. I just use them because they're the easiest way to get our show out onto the podcasting platforms. Um, while you're there, just give us a 5-star review. Like I said before, we fund all of this stuff out of our pocket, all of our equipment, all of our subscriptions and everything to bring the show to everybody. We don't ask for a dime. We just ask that you share the show, like, subscribe, ring the bells, or all that other crap. Follow us on Facebook, like I said, and give us a good review. That's all we ask, is that you support with your viewership. That's it. That's it. So hopefully Chad comes back quickly. I'm sure he's doing this because I left him, but that was a technical issue. Um, yeah, so hopefully he comes back soon. And like I said before, go out and follow us on Facebook, like and subscribe on YouTube. Um, one of the things that we were talking about earlier are these people or these creatures or other humans that fairly wild humans. There was a story Chad and I were talking about earlier in the week. I want to say it was back in mid 80s or late 70s in the town that I live in. There's some train tracks that run along the river, and some people were hiking along the train tracks, and they saw what they described as a feral human that had longer, straggly hair and patchy fur come down off the mountain, walk across the train tracks, go down to the river and drink from the river, got back up and walked up the mountain. But what they did say is they noticed how much taller it appeared than a normal person. So the description I was telling about the wild person that there was, I think it was actually either on the BFRO or the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society's map sightings map. It was on one of those. I remember reading it about that wild person that people said they saw come down off the side of the hill over the train tracks in town, and
Yeah,
it fit very closely to the descriptions that we had talked about with this race of wild people. So I thought that was kind of
yeah,
interesting because it was literally right up the road from my house. So
hmm yeah.
kind of neat.
And getting back to the thought of like a primitive shamanic practice, right?
Mhm.
If you ever talk to any of those tribes that are still living that primitive life,
Mhm.
in Brazil and in other parts of the world, in Africa and stuff like that, when you talk to them, their worldview is completely foreign to us.
Yeah.
The their thoughts about things or the way things are, why things happen, completely different than ours.
Mhm.
So, like, if we're looking at this as a primitive human, group or subhuman in the sense of not Homo sapien sapien, but as a subgroup somewhere under us or split off from us somewhere,
Mhm.
and they're maintaining this very primitive life, and like I said, the foods and all this stuff, you know, they would have a different sensibility to that.
Mhm.
If you think about some of the tribes and stuff like that, going into like Brazil and stuff like that, with the use of DMT, or the Native Americans with like peyote or mescaline and psilocybin in other areas and stuff like that, they have this like what they consider some kind of contact with the spirit world or with the universe, and it's a they talk to paranormal, what we would consider paranormal beings and phenomena. They
Mhm.
openly discuss this with their experiences and stuff like that, and even to the point where there's evidence of like psychic abilities, like not necessarily you know the fake psychics that are on television, but the senses of like they might go 90%, 9 out of 10 cards that you hold facing away from them, they tell you what's on the other side of the card in different sequences, different orders, different, stuff like that. These people are shown to have these abilities. Like they're getting a cosmic feedback, so to say,
Yeah.
of like, hey, it's a cross or it's a plus sign or whatever however the language breaks down is like, oh, it's an equal sign, it's a cross, it's a this, it's a that. They don't necessarily know that just because, oh, I'm staring at the back of this card and I'm thinking real hard. Well, no, something is telling them.
Yeah.
Something from that other realm is speaking to them and telling them, like, hey, it's this. Well, if you apply that to survival, and you have this group that has the actual senses that we're supposed to have, the clean, open channels to the environment, they could blend in. They could move, across the country with minimal human contact.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You think about Bigfoot sightings aren't happening every 5 seconds.
Mhm.
I'm sure seeing crows happens way more often than seeing Bigfoot.
Right.
You know, so these people could be, just maneuvering right at the edges of what we understand or where we're looking.
Mhm.
And, it's definitely something that could just be the difference of like, hey, chasing the next modern invention or never chasing the first modern invention.
Right. Well, we were
So,
talking before about that tribe that was down in the Amazon rainforest where they don't even have a full on language. They're,
mhm,
you know what I mean? It's kind of clicks and sounds that are kind of patterned in a way that it makes some kind of sense, but
mhm,
it's a very, very rudimentary form of language. And they when they first saw a white person, they they th I 'cause they had a video when they were first making contact with this tribe. Like, you could see in the faces of these people, their eyes are lit up like a deer in headlight. Like, you could tell that they were terrified, and after they found out how to communicate with them, they kind of looked at, a Caucasian person as if it was a reanimated corpse, because when they die, their pigmentation flushes out, they get very pale or grayish colored, and they thought that it was a reanimated person. Like, it was completely foreign and terrifying to these poor people when they first were made contact with. And
Mhm.
uh it's just, it is very interesting that there are still groups of people out there that are so far removed from what we, are what we consider modern life and whatnot, or the way the world is. And to be able to view the world from their standpoint, I think would
Mhm.
be just amazing, because it would be so, like, to your point, it would be so foreign and alien to us, the
Mhm.
way they see things, and vice versa. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
it would probably, they'd probably stroke out if they were brought into a modern city to see what all is in the world
Mhm.
beyond their, their forest that they know intimately. But yeah, I would love to be able to go backwards
Mhm.
and, you know what I mean, view things and see things, even the way their feet and everything were. Their like, I guess from wearing shoes and everything, our foot structure has narrowed and kind of tapers to a point. Their toes were almost like blunt, flat across. All their toes were almost at the same length, and their big toes were extended and kind of curved, almost like an opposable thumb, kind of, because they're
Mhm.
going around different terrain and they're still using their toes as means of gripping, and
Mhm.
where we don't. It's just, it was unbelievable to see the differences, even like their hands. Like, if you look at a great ape's hands, how, like, they're a little bit more stumpy because they're still kind of like knuckle walking, and they're
Mhm.
not as dexterous. Even like their hands and stuff were kind of a little bit more stumpy, and there was more of a permanent curl in their fingers and their appendage, like their their fingers. And it just, I don't know, it was blowing my mind when I was watching this documentary, just to see how it was basically like taking a glimpse of what we looked like before we have all these modern, for lack of better terms, conveniences,
Mhm.
and removed ourselves from the wild. It was crazy.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you take these tribes that we were talking about in the big thicket, and I mean, even the Native Americans, I mean, to earlier settlers, they were the wild people. They were these savages or whatever.
Yeah.
And then for the Native American people to say there's this group that's even more in tune with nature than we are, and more, feral or wild or whatever. Not that, I hate saying it that way, because it's not like they were wild people, you know what I mean? But to, I guess, our the settler standpoint, or whatever, um, that's got to be mind blowing. And to think that they could still possibly exist. And to your point, did they migrate north? Are they what we are considering Bigfoot? And we were
Mhm.
talking earlier in the week, just take Sasquatch reports in different geographic locations. You go to the Pacific Northwest, you go into the northern areas, it's colder, it's more mountainous, it's a little bit more, you need to be a little bit more robust and tough to survive in some of those climates. You have harsher winters, extreme climate changes, and then you go down south into the warmer climates, and again, it's not all desert, as we found out earlier in the show. um so you're going to have the taller, lankier, thinner, not necessarily needing that extra bulk or that extra insulation or whatever. So yes, those people would be tall and lanky, and not exactly the same as a northern Bigfoot. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I could definitely see how, even if it was the same tribe, like you were talking about, like in John Green's statements in his books, that migrated up north, they would change.
Mhm.
Because, like, we're talking about the deer, and whatever, the depending on elevation and geographical location, some are the rusty brown, some are more of like a gray, or almost like a wheat color, like
Mhm.
you know
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
mean?
Yeah, they
So
fall in the spectrum of
right,
color.
right. So I would imagine that these, I don't know what you want, people or whatever it is that they may be. You know, what's wrong?
That was just the weirdest thing.
What happened? Just your face stopped me mid-sentence. I was gonna say, God, please tell me there's not something behind me. Yes, Cindy, adaptation. Yes, they adapt to their environment for sure. What? Why do you have that face?
I don't know if it was some kind of defect in the video,
Uh-huh.
but something just went streaming across your head. Not look here, not
Uh-huh.
this way. This way.
I do have a light right above me. Maybe it was reflecting off the.
It didn't look like it was on your headphones. It looked like it was above your head.
And it wasn't the light way back on my.
No, it's weird because it kind of looked like it started in that area, but then just like kind of like went across your headphones and out of frame.
Well, I tell you what, as it's getting warmer, and this is a weird, and we're totally diverting here from the topic. Apologize to our listeners. Um, I get these freaking like black flies in my windowsill over here, and I don't know where the hell they're coming from. Every time I come out to work and I open up my window, like the studio's sealed off, and I keep getting these damn flies in my window. So it could be one of them. Like you had the moth earlier, it could have been the fly going over my head or something. I don't know. But I had one that was buzzing around the other day when I was working. It was annoying as hell. But anyways, back to the topic. I'm just going to try and avoid thinking that there might be something in here with me. um, yes. So could it be a remigration north? Because we were talking about before how the theory is that if they did come, people did come over the Bering Strait or the Bering Land Bridge and migrate south. They went all the way down to South America and populated the Americas. It could be that they went back the other way, or there were groups of them that stayed up there and migrated in an easterly direction. I don't know. I don't know. Or it could be like we were talking about Heidelbergensis or whatever it is,
Mhm.
that one branch of our human ancestry, uh, which was, like I said, taller than modern humans, but not as small as the Australopithecus, not as big as Gigantopithecus is theorized to be. So who knows? And maybe it's this little pocket relic hominid that's still kind of existing. I don't know, but being that these sightings were considerably modern in the
Mhm.
50s and just a few decades ago, I find that extremely intriguing and would just freaking love to see something like that.
Mhm.
We need to do road trips, Chad. That's what we need to do.
Mm. Let's go to Texas.
Hmm.
You'd have fun.
I,
Lots of barbecue.
dude, any road
Tons,
trip with you would be fun.
tons of barbecued meats.
I'm in. I'm
That's the
in.
reason I even go half the time. Barbecues. But
Can't beat
so,
barbecues. Is there anything else to add to this?
not really. I just wanted to kind of, when we're talking about, the fact that these things are, giant, above 7 foot tall,
Hmm.
right? You have the chief, I think it was the Osage Indians,
Hmm.
whose name was Black Dog.
Hmm.
He was reported between 7'5" and 7'8".
Jesus.
And most of his warriors were reported to be in that 6'6" to 7 foot range.
Hmm.
And this was even with dealing with Europeans at that point. This guy was 7'5" to 7'8",
Jeez.
right? And that brought me to researching. We see all these giants and stuff like that. We have pro basketball players and stuff like that. And I had to figure out who was the largest. At one point, it was considered the largest non-pathological giant.
Hmm.
So a pathological giant would have some kind of pituitary gland tumor, human growth hormone would be being secreted constantly, cause them to grow bigger. A non-pathological giant is somebody who is just a giant. And I found a name, Angus MacAskill.
Mm-hmm.
He was 7'9",
That's a big boy.
475 pounds.
That's a really big boy.
And if anybody's ever seen the show with Brian Shaw and Oberst and Eddie Hall, the Strong Men Take on History.
Yes.
He's actually one of the features in there, and I don't think you loaded the picture, right?
Matt commenting on my beard lines. God, you're a distraction. We have enough distractions. I do. Which picture did you want me to bring up?
Do you have that one with Eddie with Brian Shaw?
Yes.
Standing.
Hopefully, I could get this to work. So bear with me. There we go.
So this is a replica of. In the background there is Angus MacAskill, and this is Brian Shaw, who is 6'8", legit 6'8", 475 pounds. That's supposed to be a life-size representation of MacAskill in the background there. Look at the size of that man's hands compared to one of the world's strongest men's hands. This dude doesn't have little hands.
No, that's a massive.
He's also 6'8", 475 pounds.
Now, one thing I would like to point out too is obviously there's a pretty extreme height difference, and he's a slender 475 compared to Brian.
Mm-hmm. And could you bring up the other picture?
Yep, let me hide this one. And there you go.
So that is MacAskill standing with a normal-sized human male.
So that's the actual guy that Shaw was standing next to.
Yeah, that's him there.
Jeez.
Now that man was 7'9", 475 pounds, right? Now, there are various accounts of an incident with an anchor that may have taken place in either New York City or New Orleans. French sailors apparently taunted MacAskill to lift an anchor lying on the wharf, which was estimated to weigh between 2,200 and 2,700 pounds, or 998 to 1,220 kilograms, because I always got to throw those in there.
Sure do.
MacAskill easily did so and walked down the wharf with it, but one of the anchor's flux caught in his side of his shoulder and ended up crippling him. However, this was not the cause of his death. He lived actually for many years after. He's also rumored to have carried barrels weighing over 350 pounds apiece under each arm. And he is actually reported to have been able to lift 112 pounds or 50.8 kilograms. Also, 350 pounds is 160 kilograms. Yeah, I got to throw those in there.
You got it.
Now, 112 pounds or 50.8 kilograms with just two fingers and hold it at arm's length for 10 minutes.
Dude, that's like holding my oldest daughter out with my two fingers for that's insanity.
Yeah. Now, there's also a woman, Rumjay Gilga. I do apologize. I do apologize if she's listening. I highly doubt she is. Is the tallest living woman currently without a pathological condition, and she's only like 7 foot.
Only. So she's like as tall as Shaq, basically. Wasn't he like 7'1" or 7'2"?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah,
like 7'1", 7'2" ish.
That's a big chick.
Yeah. So these are non-pathological giants, so therefore, like I said, there's no conditions that cause the giantism. So the thought of having, a group of people out there that could have been 7 foot tall or still are 7 foot tall and 400 or 500 pounds, 600 pounds. Shaq was three something, 380 at one point,
Mhm.
stretched over 7 foot 2 inches. You know, wasn't fat. He's a
No.
big dude.
Yeah.
So you have a naturally occurring set of people out there who are over 7 foot tall.
Mhm.
So that was really my take on this big thicket case, and it being more or less a group of primitive natives who may still be existing and may actually be a large percentage of Bigfoot sightings.
Yeah. And you can't say that it is kind of like, um, in a singular location. You know what I
Mhm,
mean? Because all throughout the United States, especially the East Coast, you have what we talked about before with those burial mounds.
mhm, yeah,
And as now they were always, regarded as like sacred Native American sites and stuff like that. That's, where they supposedly buried their dead. But some of them, especially, back in the early days of our country's, um, when it was first being settled, those mounds were excavated and they were raided and they were, dug up, and they had supposedly found many, many, many skeletal remains of 7 foot, 8 foot, 10 foot, even up to like 15 feet. Some of them were
mm,
eh, supposedly measured out to be. I mean, 15 feet. You look at that dude, or that, what was that really tall guy? He had the pituitary issue though, Wadlow or something like that.
yeah,
He was like 8 foot 11,
yeah,
and you see him standing next to people, and he dwarfed Shaq, for example. Like, he made Shaq look like a baby. You think 15 feet?
mhm.
That's just I can't even fathom.
I find that hard to believe.
I agree, but, I mean, that's getting into that Smithsonian cover up and
Yeah,
all that other kinda stuff, but
yeah, but I mean, here's the thing, were there people out there that were 7 foot tall? Well,
I would not doubt it.
we have people now that are 7 foot tall or taller,
Yeah.
so could
Naturally, too, like you're
yeah,
saying, not because of a pituitary issue.
yeah. So if you have a group of people who are 7 foot tall, and the say maybe the males are 7 foot plus and the females are mid 6 foot,
Yeah.
you're gonna have offspring who might only be 5 foot tall in some cases, but then you're also gonna have ones that are 7 foot tall. Because look at most people whose, there are some people who, if you look at their parents, are, 7 footers and their kids are 7 footers. Yeah, that does happen.
Mhm.
But a lot of people who are 7 foot tall, when you look at their parents, dad's maybe like 5'10",
Yeah. Yeah, it's
mom's
like
like
a
5'5", 5'6", and all of a sudden the son is, or the daughter is 6'11". It's not always a guarantee, but then you do look at some of those families where, dad's 6'10", mom's 6'7", they have kids and all the kids are 7 footers or 6'6" and above.
yeah.
There's that one family, I don't know if they're on Instagram, TikTok, or whatever, but it's like a mom and dad who are both like ex basketball players.
Mhm.
I don't know where I don't think they were like NBA players, but they played professionally overseas or something. They're both, mom is like, I think like 6'7", dad is like a legit 7 footer.
Yeah.
They have 3 or 4 kids, and every one of their kids is a teenager and is over 6'6". Like the sons are, like the one or two of the sons are 7 footers.
Yeah.
I mean, they look gangly as all hell, but they're 7 foot.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's like if you look at Shaq and stuff like, and Brian Shaw, like, they're big dudes, and they're proportionately big dudes.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah,
that Wadlow, and a lot of the people that have giantism due to the pituitary
yeah.
issue, you're right. They're kind of gangly. They look just disproportionate.
Mhm. Well, you do have some large 7-footers that are pituitary related, like
Yeah.
Andre and
Mhm.
Paul White, but they're also
Paul White was pituitary? I thought he was just a
no,
big dude.
he had a tumor removed.
Oh, wow, okay. Well,
Yeah,
he looks very proportionate, though.
yeah. Well, I mean, he was heavy there for a while.
Yeah, yeah, I guess if he thinned out, he might look a little.
Well, he has over the years. He's, trimmed down a bit, but also it wasn't that he was genetically predispositioned to be big.
Mhm.
Weight wise, he just didn't take care of eating healthy and,
Yeah, yeah,
you know what I mean? He got down. He looks spelt for a man who's 7'2",
yeah, yeah,
you know, but it was because he changed his diet, exercised more, and did stuff. But when he was like a college basketball player, he wasn't fat.
yeah,
He was a 7-footer. He was just a big 7-footer, like 300-pounder at 7 foot
yeah.
isn't terribly
No,
obese.
no. Mm-mm.
It might be clinically, but it's not appearance wise.
Yeah.
But so I think that wraps up this segment of Giants in America.
Oh, yeah, yes.
I
Yes,
think,
we have exceeded our time frame quite a
yeah,
bit.
we will definitely look into the other giant stories around America and stuff like that. See if
Mhm.
there's anything we can pull together for an episode.
Yeah,
Worth looking.
I'd like to talk about that the Smithsonian connection and why they were trying to hide these bodies, but we'll get into it in another show. We'll get into
Yeah,
it in another
yeah,
show.
'cause we could spend 4
Um,
hours talking about that, I think.
I think our next show, you had mentioned the people down in, like, the Amazon and the DMT and ayahuasca and stuff like that. I think the next show we wanna kinda dive in a little bit more into DMT, its effects, and some of these supposed DMT entities that people experience while under the influence of DMT. So I think that's where we're going to go for the next show and kind of dive into that a little bit. Um, so that will be 2 weeks from now. I'll get the dates later, but 2 weeks from now, we're going to be talking about DMT and the DMT entities. But Chad, I really appreciate you putting all this stuff together for tonight's show. And aside from our technical issues, I think this was a really fantastic show. And Matt, thank you for the laughs and the smiles, buddy. I you had some good ones there, and I hope you like the hat. I actually like it too. And Chad, again, thank you for putting it together, buddy. I
Yep,
apologize for the internet issues, but it's you never know. It's a hit or miss with this provider. So
mhm,
everybody who tuned in tonight, thank you so very much as always for tuning in. We appreciate you guys taking this little journey with us. Yeah, that's all I got.
yep. Thank you, everybody. You guys all have a great week, and we will talk to you in 2 weeks.
That's right. All right. Have a good night, buddy. See you all later.